An 8-year-old girl asked Elon Musk a simple yet powerful question. Who is God and why should we believe in him? This question not only made him one of the greatest minds in the world reflect, but also created a poignant moment that changed the girl's life. On a warm morning at the hospital, Elon Musk was standing in the hallway, chatting with doctors and medical staff. It was part of the charity work he regularly does. But this time, something unexpected happened. A young girl, out of nowhere, walked up and gently interrupted his conversation. With an innocent yet determined look in her eyes, she spoke. Uncle Elon, I have a question I want to ask you. Her voice was as clear as a bell, yet it carried a strange weight. Musk looked up at the girl, smiling, thinking that this question wouldn't be too complicated. But as she was about to ask her question, he suddenly felt unsure. Sure, he replied, a brief smile crossing his face, his voice warm. But the girl's question left him stunned. What do you think happens when we die? She asked, without hesitation, her pure eyes staring directly at him, as if waiting for a meaningful answer. Elon paused, taken aback. This wasn't a question he usually received from adults, let alone from a child, though he was someone who was always ready to answer tough questions. In that moment, the silence between them seemed to fill the space. His mind was in turmoil, unable to come up with a suitable response. That's a big question, Elon began, his voice deep and serious. And honestly, I don't have all the answers. He looked at the girl intently, feeling the sincerity in her gaze, and paused for a moment, thinking about how to explain in a simple way. There are many things in this world that we can't explain, he continued. Science helps us understand the universe, the planets, and the shining stars. But there are things that science can't touch. He paused, sighing, feeling that his words weren't enough to clarify everything in the girl's mind. He looked into her curious eyes and gently continued. Maybe when we leave this world, there's something greater waiting for us. A part of a vast universe that we can't fully imagine. The girl listened to every word he said, but it was clear that she didn't fully understand. A spark of doubt appeared in her eyes, and she continued with another question. So when we die, do we become a part of the stars? She asked, her voice soft yet full of wonder, her hands lightly clenched as if to grasp the answer. Elon felt as if he had been placed in a situation he could never have prepared for. The girl's question stopped him in his tracks, unsure of how to respond. The issues he had solved throughout his career could be answered through technology, logic, and reason. But this question touched a deep part of his heart, a place that was not easily explained. He gently rubbed his chin, the weight heavy in his chest. He knew that every word he spoke would carry great weight, not just as advice but as an answer to a soul searching for understanding of the world. This wasn't about the things he had created or the achievements he had reached. This was about something that went beyond all logic, touching the very existence of humanity. We may not need to have all the answers right away, Elon finally spoke, his words soft yet profound. Maybe sometimes, not knowing is part of understanding. The girl stood still, her sharp gaze fixed on him. She carefully considered every word he said, but the question in her heart remained unanswered. And then, another question arose from her, this time her voice light, but carrying a sense of deep expectation. So, what if there is a God? She asked, her eyes never leaving Elon's face, as if hoping to find a real answer. Elon's heart skipped a beat. It was a question he had never anticipated. But when it came from a child, it carried an innocence that even he couldn't ignore. It was a question many might avoid. But this girl asked it with sincerity and strength. A strange mix of confusion and unease stirred within him. He took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure to answer. People believe in different things. Some believe in God, Some believe in science, and others try to combine both. But I think believing in something greater than ourselves can bring hope, an invisible strength that we can't always explain. The girl pondered for a moment, her eyes seeming to brighten. She wasn't expecting an easy answer, but Elon's words made her feel like she wasn't alone in her thoughts. But then, her next question came, with a slight hint of worry in her voice. "What if God isn't real?" she asked, a subtle tremble in her voice that made Elon feel uneasy. He paused for a second, feeling as though he had wandered into a maze with no way out. How could he explain this uncertainty? How could he answer without making the girl feel like she was losing her faith? Elon looked at the girl, his eyes full of contemplation. "I'm not sure I can give you the perfect answer, but I think these questions are part of the journey. Sometimes, it's the questions that lead us to find the answers. And sometimes, it's the journey itself that helps us understand more about who we are." The girl sat quietly, her small hands clenched tightly, as though holding back her overwhelming thoughts. Elon watched her, a sense of unease flashing through his heart. Even though her eyes still seemed to shine, he couldn't help but notice the confusion, as if there was something in her mind that hadn't yet been resolved. "Do you think God is real?" the girl asked, her voice just loud enough to hear, but within it was a rare sincerity. "I'm afraid. What if I never find the answer?" Elon felt his heart tighten. He had faced countless difficult questions, but this one came from an innocent heart, full of doubt and fear. This made him more confused than ever. Perhaps he had once thought that the truth was something easily grasped, but now he realized that it wasn't always the case. "Don't worry. Fear is something you can feel, and it's part of life," Elon replied, his voice warm but patient. "But what's important is, you never have to be alone. There will always be people who love you, and there will always be things to believe in, even if you haven't found the answer yet." The girl looked at him, her eyes filled with emotion, as if listening intently to every word he said. Everything around seemed to quiet down. Then, in a moment no one could have predicted, the girl began to cry. Her tears seemed to have been held back for too long, and now they fell like a small stream, unable to stop. Elon didn't know what to do immediately. He had never witnessed this when talking to a child, and even less did he know how to handle the mixed emotions in her heart. But then he realized, not every word was enough to solve everything. Sometimes, just being present was enough to soothe the silent pain. He gently placed his hand on her shoulder, his eyes filled with understanding. "It's okay to cry, sweetie," he said, his voice as gentle as the waves. "Sometimes we need to cry to lighten our hearts. But don't forget, you don't have to have all the answers right away. What matters is that you keep searching." The girl wiped her tears, nodding, but her face still carried the questions that had not yet been answered. Elon stood there, watching her, feeling a strange sensation, as if time had stopped in this moment. In that instant, he realized something new. Despite being the creator of technologies, he had never fully understood the power of simple conversations, which could change someone. "You've made me think a lot," Elon said, his gaze towards the girl filled with a respect that words could not express. "I may not have all the answers, but you've made me realize that it's the questions that push us forward." The girl looked up at him, her eyes now filled with a new belief. She didn't need to have all the answers, but deep inside, a sense of peace had quietly entered, making her feel lighter than ever. And perhaps that was what she had been searching for all along, a sense of safety amid the big questions that didn't have immediate answers. Elon turned to leave, but just as he was about to step out of the room, he stopped, a strange undercurrent rising in his heart. He turned back to look at the girl, his eyes bright with something unfamiliar, though the girl still sat still, Her expression now seemed entirely different from before. The clouds of worry had vanished, replaced by a miraculous sense of peace, as if she had found a missing piece to her question. The simple question the girl asked had sparked a profound thought in Elon. It wasn't a question that could be answered right away, but it was a question that seemed to touch the core of existence. Walking down the hospital hallway, he felt each step heavy, as if not just he was moving, but thousands of thoughts and questions were following one another, swirling in his mind. The girl's questions still echoed in him like a sad melody, impossible to erase. He had answered her seriously, but for some reason, he felt his response was like an incomplete fragment. Was it enough? Could he provide her with something more than dry knowledge? Cold answers about theories and science? The hospital passed quietly, but inside Elon, it was like a storm. He couldn't shake the feeling that, despite reaching great heights in technology, there was something he had missed. Something that couldn't be measured by formulas or theories. The girl, with her question, seemed to be seeking something different, not a definitive answer, but empathy, understanding. Was it possible that people needed not only theory but also a sense of being cared for, comforted in their weakest moments? These thoughts followed Elon throughout his journey. As he continued walking, he suddenly remembered a time in the past when his questions seemed limitless. As a child, he was always eager to ask about everything. About how the world worked. About things invisible that he couldn't see. These questions were sometimes simple, sometimes naive. But they were questions that opened up an entire universe. A world full of mysteries. And then, he wondered, why did he now feel as if he was slowly losing the ability to ask? When he thought about the works he had built, about the things he had contributed to the world, he suddenly realized that perhaps all of those things were just small pieces in the larger picture of life. Pieces that we sometimes only realize when we face questions about life and death. Questions that science cannot explain. Instead of continuing to search for answers through numbers, he began placing himself in different situations. He read books, not about technology or engineering, but about philosophy, about belief, and questions that had no answers. He conversed with people who held different beliefs, but there was no answer that truly satisfied him. Each conversation made him feel like he was falling into a vortex of uncertainty, but it also opened up new pathways for him to reflect upon. Gradually, he realized that perhaps it was the unknown that made life interesting. Accepting that there were things that couldn't be explained, that some things would forever be beyond human understanding, was a form of liberation. Because sometimes, it was the uncertainty, the unanswered questions, that brought peace and freedom that we couldn't find anywhere else. One night, when Elon sat alone on the balcony, looking up at the dark sky, he felt as if he was merging with the vast universe. The stars shimmering above were like endless questions. Questions that humans would never be able to fully answer. And perhaps, what mattered was not finding the answer to everything, but that throughout the journey, we had lived, we had experienced, we had searched. It was this search that was the ultimate answer. And perhaps, that was what gave life its value. A few weeks after meeting the little girl, Elon attended an evening gathering of the world's leading minds from all over the globe. The event was held in an elegant space where brilliant figures in science, technology, philosophy, and business came together to share ideas and dreams about a future that transcended all limits. The discussion was non-stop, covering cosmic discoveries, artificial intelligence, and revolutionary projects they were working on. However, as time passed and the night grew late, the conversation began to shift from dry scientific matters to profound questions about the nature of the universe. And ultimately, faith. Elon sat quietly, his bright eyes following every word of the debate around him. Both sides made sharp points. One side asserted that everything could be explained through science, while the other believed in the guidance of an invisible force. Something beyond human intellect. As the conversation moved into abstract concepts, Elon remained silent, listening calmly. Then, in that moment, his gaze fell upon an elderly woman sitting across from him. She had not spoken once, yet her presence felt like a strange, mystical energy full of knowledge. As the space seemed to quiet down, the elderly woman finally spoke, her voice gentle yet full of wisdom. "Mr. Musk, you have conquered the skies, built gigantic machines to take humans into space. But when night falls, and you look up at the stars, what do you feel? What do you believe when you stand beneath that vast sky?" Elon hesitated. The question was unlike any he had ever heard. It was not just a question about his achievements, but a question that opened up a completely different space. Not about technology, but about the nature of humanity itself. He suddenly remembered the little girl, recalling the simple yet profound questions she had asked him. And now, before this elderly woman, he felt those questions rise up again. Elon took a deep breath and gently replied, "When I look at the universe, I don't just see planets and stars. I see something larger. Something beyond everything we can explain with logic. With every discovery, I realize that no matter how hard we try, there are things we can never fully understand. Perhaps that is the beauty of the universe, a mystery that never ends." The elderly woman smiled, her gaze seeming to see through him, understanding more than Elon had just said. "So, you believe that this mystery could be a sign of a force beyond scientific theory, don't you?" Elon looked up at the night sky, the stars twinkling as though they were trying to tell him something he couldn't quite hear. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice deeper. "Perhaps. I think there is some force that connects everything. Every living being. Every object in this universe. Something we can't see or touch. But perhaps it is this very lack of understanding that drives us forward. To keep exploring." The elderly woman nodded, her smile warm and sincere. "Exactly. In the process of seeking, we will gradually approach greater truths. Sometimes, not all the questions we ask need immediate answers. It is those questions, those doubts, that truly bring us closer to understanding." Elon was silent, sensing a change within himself, though he still did not have all the answers. This encounter with the elderly woman had opened up a new perspective, not just about technology, but about the eternal questions humanity always asks when faced with things beyond their comprehension. A few months later, Elon walked into that hospital again. This time, he wasn't there for work, but because a friend was receiving treatment there. As he strolled down the hallway, a strange feeling surged within him, as though something unfinished was calling him back. He remembered the little girl, the one who had wondered about life and death, asking innocent yet profound questions. He wondered how she was doing now, whether she was still there. Elon walked down the hall, his steps seemingly guided by something invisible. He reached the waiting room and was surprised to see the little girl sitting there, her eyes still full of curiosity. But now she was no longer the small child she once was. She had grown a little, maybe a year older, but those eyes still sparkled with unanswered questions. She noticed Elon right away, stood up, and walked toward him. "Mr. Musk, you're here again?" she said, her voice full of joy. Elon smiled gently, bending down to her level. "I couldn't not come back," he replied, his gaze warm. "I haven't stopped thinking about what we talked about." The little girl looked at him intently, her eyes wide. "What have you been thinking about? Are you wondering about something bigger? Like what happens after we're gone?" Elon nodded, pausing for a moment. "Yes. And I've discovered something important." The little girl stayed silent, a faint smile forming on her lips. "What is it, Mr. Musk?" "I realize that sometimes there are questions that don't have immediate answers. Elon answered, his voice soft but profound. But the process of seeking those answers is what truly matters. Every step we take, every question we ask, brings us closer to understanding the essence of life. The little girl listened, her eyes gleaming with simple understanding. So does that mean we'll never really have the answers? That's right, Elon said. But there's one thing I know for sure, and that is that it's the act of asking new questions that helps us grow and discover. And that is part of life. The little girl smiled, her gaze reflecting a peace that only those who truly understand could feel. Then I'll keep asking, and search for the answers that feel right in my heart. That's all I could ever hope for, Elon said, then stood up and turned to leave, leaving the little girl to continue her own journey. But for Elon, that moment wasn't just a brief encounter, it was a turning point in the way he viewed the world. He realized that there are answers that will never come, but the journey of discovery is what's truly valuable. From that day on, Elon continued his work, but his mind was more at ease when contemplating the mysteries that science could not yet explain. He learned that sometimes belief and curiosity can coexist. And in this challenging world, discovery isn't just about what we know, but about what we don't know, the things left unexplained. If you enjoy emotional stories and want to explore more unique tales, don't forget to click subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our videos. We'll continue bringing you inspiring and meaningful stories, along with deep life lessons. Note, this is a fictional story, created for entertainment and to convey meaningful messages. All situations and characters in this video are products of imagination and are not intended to reflect any real events or individuals. We disclaim any responsibility related to this content.